My name is Claire Miller. I'm 35 years old. And 6 months ago, the world as I knew it simply ceased to exist. They say that grief is a heavy cloak, but they don't tell you that your own family will try to rip that cloak off your back, just to see if there's any gold hidden in the pockets. The day my husband, David, was taken from me, I was standing in a hospital hallway, shivering, covered in his blood. I called my mother, sobbing so hard I thought my lungs would collapse. And you know what she said? She said, "Claire, honey, Brandon is right in the middle of his campaign kickoff dinner. Can this wait? We can't have you sounding hysterical on the line right now." It couldn't wait. My husband was gone, but apparently, my brother's run for city council was more important than a man's life. Days later, they didn't show up at my door with a casserole or a shoulder to cry on. No, they showed up with a contract. They said I was too emotional to manage David's construction company. They said Brandon needed the capital to secure the family's future. They said family helps family. But when my 7-year-old son Leo walked into the room, holding a small rusted iron key, and asked my mother, "Is this the secret Daddy told me to give you if you were mean to Mommy?" The color drained from their faces. Before I tell you what that key unlocked and the absolute chaos it unleashed, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you believe that a mother's love is stronger than a family's greed. And drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm reading every single one of them, and I love seeing how far this story is reaching. It started on a Saturday, August 12th. It was one of those perfect, humid Pennsylvania evenings, the kind where the air smells like cut grass and charcoal smoke. David was out in the garage, working on a birdhouse for Leo. He was always building something. He used to say, "Claire, if you build it right the first time, it'll stand long after we're gone." I was in the kitchen, making a salad for dinner. I can still see him, leaning against the door frame, wiping sawdust off his forehead. He kissed me, a quick, lingering kiss that tasted like peppermint. "I'm just gonna run to the hardware store, babe," he said. "Leo wants the roof of this birdhouse to be blue. I'll be back in 20 minutes. Tops." "Drive safe," I said. I didn't even look up from the tomatoes I was slicing. I didn't know that those were the last words I'd ever say to him. Drive safe. My phone rang at 7:14 p.m. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, thinking it was another political robocall for my brother. "Mrs. Miller?" A man's voice, deep, grave. "Yes?" "This is Sergeant Higgins with the state police. There's been an accident on the intersection of Oak and Main. A semi-truck. It lost its brakes. Your husband? He was in a silver Ford?" The world tilted. The salad bowl slipped from my hands, shattering on the tile. "Is he okay? Please, tell me he's okay." "You need to get to General Memorial. Now." I don't remember the drive. I don't remember how I got Leo into his car seat. I just remember the rain, starting to fall, blurring the windshield like tears. When I got to the hospital, the chaplain was waiting. That's when you know. You don't need a doctor to tell you, when the chaplain is the one holding the door. David was gone. He was 37 years old, and he was gone because a truck driver was tired, and a red light didn't matter anymore. I sat on a plastic chair in the waiting room, Leo asleep against my leg, and I dialed my mother. I needed her. I needed the woman who brought me into this world to tell me I wasn't alone. "Hello?" My mother Margaret answered. I could hear music in the background, laughter, the sound of ice clinking in a glass. "Mom?" I choked out. "Mom, it's David. There was an accident. He didn't make it." There was a pause. 3 seconds of absolute silence. "Oh, Claire," she said, her voice shifting, but not to sadness, to calculation. "Honey, we're right in the middle of Brandon's big donor dinner. The mayor is here. Can this wait? I'll call you in the morning, okay? Just try to keep it together. Mom, David is dead. I heard you, sweetheart, but making a scene right now isn't going to bring him back. We'll talk tomorrow. Try to get some sleep. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, the screen glowing in the dark, and I felt a piece of my soul just wither away. The funeral was 3 days later, a Tuesday. August 15th. It was a sea of black umbrellas. David's crew was there, big, burly men in work boots, crying openly. They loved him. They called him the boss, but they treated him like a brother. My parents, Margaret and Robert, stood at the back. They didn't come to the front to sit with me. They didn't hold Leo's hand. They stood with my brother, Brandon, who was busy shaking hands with the local press, looking like he was at a campaign rally instead of a burial. Leo looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen. "Mommy, why is Uncle Brandon smiling?" "I don't know, baby," I whispered. "Just look at the flowers." At the reception, back at our house, I was exhausted. I just wanted to go to bed and never wake up. But my family had other plans. I was in the kitchen, pouring a glass of water, when Brandon walked in. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't offer a hug. He just leaned against the counter, adjusted his tie, and looked around the room. "David did well for himself, Claire," he said. "This house, the company, the equipment, it's a lot for a woman to handle alone." "I'm not alone, Brandon. I have David's foreman, and I have a brain." "Come on," he scoffed. "You've been a stay-at-home mom for 7 years. You don't know the first thing about payroll, or contracts, or the legalities of an estate this size." "I'll figure it out." "We've already figured it out," my mother said, appearing in the doorway. My father was right behind her. They moved like a coordinated unit. "Claire, we've spoken to a consultant. For the sake of Leo's future and the family's reputation, we think it's best if Brandon takes over the day-to-day operations of Miller Construction." I froze. "Excuse me?" "It makes sense," my father added, his voice that low, booming tone he used when he wanted to intimidate me. "Brandon needs a solid business background for the voters. And you need to grieve. We'll set up a trust for you, a stipend. You won't have to worry about a thing." "You want me to just hand over David's company? The company he built from one truck and a dream?" "We want you to be reasonable," Brandon said, stepping closer. "Half the estate. That's what we're asking. 50%. To be folded into the family trust. We'll use it to launch the campaign. And in return, we'll make sure you and Leo are taken care of." I looked at them. My mother, my father, my brother. They weren't looking at a grieving widow. They were looking at an ATM. "The answer is no," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady. "Get out of my house." "Claire," my mother warned, "don't be selfish. Think of the family." "I am thinking of the family," I said, gesturing to Leo, who was watching from the hallway. "My real family. Get out." Pause for a second. If you've ever had a family member show their true colors the second money was on the table, hit that like button. It's crazy how grief brings out the worst in some people. And make sure you're subscribed, because you won't believe the lengths they went to try and break me. The week after the funeral was a living nightmare. My mother started calling. Every hour. "Claire, your father is so disappointed. He says you're acting irrational. Is it the medication?" "I'm not on medication, Mom. I'm just sad." "Well, everyone is talking. They saw how you acted at the funeral. So, cold. People are starting to wonder if you and David were even happy." Then came the texts from Brandon. "Hey sis, just a heads up. Some of David's clients have reached out." They're worried about the stability of the company. If you don't appoint a manager soon, they're going to pull their contracts. I can step in, but you have to sign the papers by Friday. I called David's foreman, Marcus. Marcus, are the clients calling? Are they worried? Claire, nobody's calling except your brother. He showed up at the job site yesterday, trying to tell the guys he was the new owner. I kicked him off the property. Don't listen to him. We're with you. But my family didn't stop. They started a whisper campaign in our small town. At the grocery store, at the park, I'd see people whispering. Did you hear? Claire Miller is having a breakdown. She won't let her family help. Poor Leo. He's the one who's going to suffer. One evening, I was sitting at David's desk, trying to make sense of the spreadsheets. David was a genius with wood, but his filing system was chaotic. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Leo. Mommy, Grandma said you're sick in the head. Are you going away? I pulled him into my lap, my heart breaking. No, baby, I'm not going anywhere. Why would Grandma say that? She said, if you don't give Uncle Brandon the papers, the police will come and take me away because you can't take care of me. That was it. That was the line. They could come for the money. They could come for the company. But they were never, ever coming for my son. To understand why they felt entitled to David's life, you have to understand my childhood. I was the accident. Brandon was the golden child, the one they poured every cent and every dream into. He went to the best private schools. He had the best tutors. When he crashed his first car, my parents bought him a new one the next day. I was the one who wore hand-me-down sneakers. I was the one who worked 3 jobs to pay for my own community college. My father used to say, Claire, you're a worker bee. Brandon, he's the queen. You're meant to support the hive. When I met David, he was a carpenter with a beat-up truck and a laugh that made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. My parents hated him. He's a laborer, Claire, my mother said at our wedding, while David was busy dancing with his mother. He'll never be able to provide the life you deserve. You should have married someone like Brandon's friends, someone with a future. But David had a secret. He didn't just work hard, he worked smart. Over 10 years, he turned that one truck into a fleet of 20. He bought land. He invested in local real estate. He did it all while my brother was losing my parents' retirement money on tech startups that never launched. David saw how they treated me. He saw the way my mother would criticize my hair, or my house, or my parenting. He saw how Brandon would borrow money from me and never pay it back. 6 months before the accident, David came home from a meeting with his lawyer. He looked serious. Claire, I want you to promise me something, he said, sitting me down at the kitchen table. Anything. If anything ever happens to me, don't trust your family, not for a second. David, they're my parents. No, he said, his eyes flashing with a protective fire I'd never seen before. They're predators. I've seen the way they look at our bank accounts. I've heard the things Brandon says when he thinks I'm not listening. I've made sure that if I'm not here, you and Leo are a fortress. Do you understand? I didn't understand then. I thought he was being paranoid. I thought he was just stressed from work. Oh, how wrong I was. 2 weeks after the funeral, the pressure reached a boiling point. My parents and Brandon showed up at my house, unannounced. They brought a man with them, a lawyer I didn't recognize. Claire, my father said, pushing past me into the living room. This has gone on long enough. This is Mr. Henderson. He's drafted the papers for the conservatorship. A what? We're filing for control of your affairs, Brandon said, smirking. For your own protection, we have statements from neighbors and your mother about your unstable behavior. You're not fit to run a household, let alone a multi-million-dollar company. I felt the room spinning. They were actually doing it. They were trying to take my life away. I have my own lawyer, I said, though I hadn't even called one yet. Your lawyer won't matter when the judge sees the evidence, my mother said, settling onto my sofa like she was the Queen of England. Now, sign the voluntary transfer. It'll be easier for everyone, especially for Leo. That's when Leo walked in. He wasn't crying, he wasn't scared. He was holding a small rusted iron key. It was attached to a piece of twine. Mommy, he said, ignoring the vultures in the room, I found the treasure box Daddy told me about. The room went silent. What treasure box, Leo? My mother asked, her eyes lighting up with greed. Daddy said, if Grandma and Uncle Brandon started acting like wolves, I should go to the floorboard in the attic, the one under the old rug. He said the key opens the truth. My brother jumped up. Where is it, Leo? Where's the box? It's in the car, Leo said, pointing out the window. I didn't wait. I grabbed Leo's hand and ran to the garage. My brother and father were right on my heels. In the back of David's old truck, the one he refused to sell even after we got rich, was a small, heavy wooden chest. It was locked with a heavy padlock. My brother tried to grab it. Give it here, Claire. It's probably company property. Back off, Brandon, I snapped. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This is my husband's. Leo, give me the key. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a heavy, satisfying click. I opened the lid. There wasn't any gold. There weren't any stacks of cash. There was a manila envelope and a small digital voice recorder. I pulled out the envelope first. It was addressed to the district attorney. My mother's face went from curious to deathly pale. Claire, she whispered. What is that? I didn't answer. I pressed play on the voice recorder. The voice that filled the garage was David's. It was clear, steady, and filled with a cold, righteous anger. My name is David Miller, the recording began. It is March 14th, and I am currently sitting in my office. 10 minutes ago, Brandon Teller, my brother-in-law, offered me a bribe. He told me that if I helped him launder $50,000 of campaign donations through my construction company, he would make sure my new development projects were approved by the city council without any inspections. Brandon staggered back, his hand catching on the side of the truck. That's a lie. He recorded me? The recording continued. Brandon isn't the only one. My mother-in-law, Margaret, came to me last week. She told me that if I didn't give her a loan of $100,000 to cover Brandon's old debts, she would tell Claire that I was having an affair with my secretary. She said she had proof. I told her to get out, but I kept the security footage of her saying it. My mother sank to the garage floor, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Furthermore, David's voice went on, I have documented every single time Robert Teller has tried to siphon materials from my job sites for his own personal projects. I've kept the logs. I've kept the photos. This box contains the thumb drive with all the evidence. If I am dead, and this box is open, it means my family has come for my wife. It means they've crossed the line. The recording ended with a final message, just for me. Claire, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. I wanted to protect you from the truth about who they are, but I knew they wouldn't let you be. Use this. Protect our son. I love you. Forever. The silence in the garage was deafening. Even the lawyer, Mr. Henderson, looked horrified. He quietly tucked his briefcase under his arm and started walking toward the driveway. I think I'll be withdrawing from this case, he murmured as he passed me. I looked at my brother, the golden boy, the future politician. 50%, Brandon? I said. My voice was a whip. You wanted 50% of David's life? Claire, honey, we can talk about this, my father started, his voice shaking. There's nothing to talk about. You have 10 minutes to get off my property. If I ever see your faces again, if you ever call me, if you even look in Leo's direction, This envelope goes straight to the DA, and the recording goes to every news station in the state. You wouldn't, my mother sobbed. We're your parents. No, I said, looking at her with absolute clarity. You're the people who skipped my husband's funeral to plan a heist. You're the people who told my son his mother was sick in the head. You're not my parents. You're just people I used to know. Brandon tried to step forward, his eyes wild. You're going to ruin me, my career, my life. You ruined yourself, Brandon. David just took notes. I walked back into the house, Leo by my side, and I slammed the door. I locked it, and for the first time in 3 weeks, I breathed. They didn't call. They didn't come back. A week later, Brandon officially withdrew from the city council race. He cited personal family matters. My parents moved 2 towns over. They sold their house. I heard they're living in a small condo now, trying to figure out how to pay back the debts Brandon racked up. I didn't send the envelope to the DA, not because I'm nice, but because David's final wish was for me to have peace. And peace doesn't come from a courtroom, it comes from silence. I took over Miller Construction. It wasn't easy. I had to learn everything, from the ground up. I spent months in the office, Marcus by my side, learning how to read blueprints and manage payroll. I made mistakes. I lost a few contracts. But 6 months later, we're stronger than we've ever been. The guys on the crew, they call me the boss now, and they say it with respect. I kept David's office exactly the way it was. His coffee mug is still on the desk. His blueprints are still pinned to the wall. But I added one thing, a framed photo of the 3 of us. From the day we finished the birdhouse. Leo is doing well. He's in 2nd grade now. He's the star of his soccer team. He still talks to his dad, every night, before he goes to sleep. Mommy? He asked me last night, as I was tucking him in. Yeah, baby? Do you think Daddy knew we'd be okay? I kissed his forehead. I think he made sure of it. If this story reminded you that you're stronger than you think, please, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see what happened when my brother tried to reach out one last time through an anonymous letter, hit that subscribe button. Because the story, it doesn't end here. If you've ever had to cut off a toxic family member to protect your peace, leave a heart in the comments. Let's show the world that we're not alone. The first holiday without David was brutal. In America, we have this obsession with the perfect Thanksgiving, the big turkey, the house full of relatives, the football on the TV. But for me, Thanksgiving was just a reminder of the empty chair at the head of the table. My mother tried to text me that morning. Claire, it's Thanksgiving. We're family. Don't you think it's time to move past this? We miss Leo. We're having a small dinner at the new place. Please come. I didn't respond. I didn't even feel the urge to yell. I just felt done. Instead, I hosted a dinner for David's crew. 25 men and their families crowded into my house. We didn't have a fancy tablecloth. We didn't have a donor dinner. We had 3 turkeys, 6 types of stuffing, and a lot of stories about David. Marcus stood up, his glass of cider raised high. To the man who built the foundation, he said, his voice cracking, and to the woman who's keeping the roof over our heads, to Claire. To Claire! The room roared. I looked around the room, at the people who actually showed up, people who didn't care about trusts or campaign funds, people who just cared that David was a good man and that his son was loved. That was the moment I realized that family isn't about the blood in your veins, it's about the people who stand with you when the storm is at its worst. People think success happens overnight. They see a company like Miller Construction, and they assume it was easy. But David and I, we started with nothing. I remember the first winter. We were living in a tiny apartment, the kind where you can hear the neighbor's TV through the walls. David would wake up at 4 a.m. his hands cracked and bleeding from the cold. He'd spend 12 hours on a job site, then come home and spend 4 hours doing the books. I was working at the local diner, taking extra shifts just to buy a new set of tires for his truck. "One day, Claire," he'd say, soaking his hands in warm water, "one day, we're gonna have a house with a yard and a son, and you're never gonna have to worry about a bill again. I don't care about the bills, David. I just care about you." He'd smile, that slow, tired smile, and pull me close. We built that life together, brick by brick. When the company started to grow, my family started to notice. Suddenly, Brandon needed a consultant role. Suddenly, my father needed David to look at some property for him. But David always saw through it. He'd say, "Claire, they don't want to help us build. They just want to move in once the house is finished." I used to defend them. I used to say, "David, they're just proud of us. They're just trying to be involved." I was so naive. I was so desperate for their approval that I couldn't see the knives they were sharpening behind their backs. But David saw, and he spent 10 years building a legal fortress to protect me from my own naivety. In April, 7 months after the accident, I was at the grocery store. I was in the produce aisle, picking out apples for Leo's lunch, when I saw my brother. Brandon didn't look like a politician anymore. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a stained polo shirt. And he looked older, grayer. "Claire," he said, blocking my path. "Brandon, look, I know things got heated, but I'm in trouble. The bank, they're foreclosing on Mom and Dad's condo. Julian, my partner, he skipped town with the last of the campaign funds. I need a loan, just $10,000, for Mom." I looked at him. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I just felt exhausted. "Go to a bank, Brandon." "I can't. My credit is shot." "Claire, we're family. You have millions sitting in that company. 10,000 is nothing to you." "It's not nothing to me," I said, gripping the handle of my cart. "That money belongs to David's employees. It belongs to Leo's college fund. It belongs to the life David worked himself into an early grave to build. You think you're entitled to it? Because of a last name? You're not. You're cold," he hissed. "You've become just like him, a cold, greedy bastard." I stopped. I turned back and looked him straight in the eyes. If being cold means protecting my son from a man who tried to steal his future, then I'll take it as a compliment. Goodbye, Brandon. I walked away. I didn't look back. When I got to the car, I sat there for a minute. I felt my hands shaking, but then I looked at the passenger seat. There was a small blue birdhouse. Leo had finished it that morning. He'd painted the roof blue, just like he wanted. I smiled. I drove home. I made dinner. I helped Leo with his homework. And that night, for the first time, I didn't dream about the accident. I dreamed about a birdhouse and a man with sawdust on his forehead telling me that I did a good job. You know, people ask me all the time, "Claire, how did you do it? How did you stay so strong?" And the truth is, I wasn't strong. I was protected. David knew that I was a giver. He knew that I would always try to see the best in people, even when they were showing me their worst. So, he became my shield. Even after he was gone, his words, his planning, his love, they were a barrier between me and the people who wanted to destroy me. If you're listening to this, and you're in a situation where you feel like you have to keep the peace, please, listen to me. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of boundaries. Don't let anyone, not your mother, not your brother, not your best friend, tell you that you owe them your happiness. You don't. You owe your happiness to yourself and to the people who actually love you. I want to hear yours. Have you ever had a David in your life? Someone who saw the truth before you did? Or are you the one who had to build your own shield? Drop a comment below. Let's talk about it. I'm replying to as many as I can. And if you found any strength in this today, share it. Send it to a friend who's struggling with family. Let them know they're not alone. It's been a year now. September 14th, the anniversary of the day the recording was made. I'm standing on the porch of the house David built. The sun is setting. Leo is in the yard, throwing a ball for the dog David always wanted us to get. The company is doing great. We just won the contract for the new library downtown. It's going to be made of stone and cedar. It's going to stand for 100 years. My family? I haven't heard from them in months. And for the first time in my life, I'm a mother. I'm a CEO, and I'm a woman who knows exactly what she's worth. After the garage door slammed shut, and the sound of my brother's screeching tires faded into the distance, I didn't go back inside, not right away. I stood there, in the humid evening air, clutching that manila envelope to my chest. Leo was standing by the workbench, his little hands resting on the birdhouse. He looked up at me, and for a second, I saw David in his eyes. Not just the color, but that steadiness, that calm in the middle of a hurricane. "Mommy?" he whispered. "Are they gone for good now?" I took a deep breath, the smell of sawdust and old oil filling my lungs. "Yes, baby, they're gone. Let's go inside." I spent the next 4 hours, after Leo was fast asleep with his stuffed dinosaur, sitting at the kitchen table. The house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock. I opened the envelope. It wasn't just a few notes. It was a chronicle. David had kept a ledger, a physical, leather-bound book hidden behind the legal documents. In it, he had recorded every single interaction he'd had with my family for the last 5 years. I started reading, and the more I read, the more I realized that I had been living in a curated reality. August 14th, 4 years ago. "Robert came by the office today," the entry began. "He asked for $20,000. He said Claire had an emergency and didn't want to worry me." I called Claire's cell. She was at the park with Leo. She had no idea. I told Robert I'd write the check once he showed me the emergency bills. He walked out. Note: don't tell Claire. It would break her heart to know her father is using her name to scam us. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. My father, the man who walked me down the aisle, had used my name as bait. Then, there was the entry about Brandon. December 21st, 3 years ago. Greater than Brandon is deep in the hole with some people in South Philly. He came to the job site, crying. He said if I didn't fix it, they'd come after the house. I checked his story. He wasn't in debt to dangerous people. He was in debt to a high-interest credit line he used to buy a boat he couldn't afford. I told him he needs to grow up. He told me, "David, you're just a glorified janitor with a hammer. You don't deserve my sister. One day, I'm going to own everything you built." I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. All those years, at Thanksgiving, at Christmas, while Brandon was laughing and making toasts about family values, he was plotting to take David's life's work. He saw my husband as a janitor, a man who worked 16-hour days to make sure his employees had health insurance, was just a worker bee to my brother. But the final entry, dated just 2 weeks before the accident, was the one that destroyed me. July 28th. I saw Margaret at the diner today. She didn't see me. She was sitting with a man I recognized from the zoning board. I heard her say, "Don't worry about the Miller contract. Once Brandon is in office, we'll have Claire sign over the land rights. She's easy to manipulate. She'll do whatever I tell her if I play the mother card." I'm done, Claire. If you ever read this, please know that I tried to give them every chance, but they don't love you. They love what you represent to their bank accounts. Protect yourself, Elle. The wolves are at the door. I closed the ledger. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From a burning, white-hot clarity. I had spent my entire life, 35 years, trying to earn the love of people who viewed me as a commodity. I had been the good daughter, the quiet sister, the one who didn't make waves, and all it had earned me was a seat at a table where I was the main course. I looked at the digital recorder. There were more files. I pressed play on the second one. Claire, David's voice said, and this time, it was soft. It was the voice he used when we were lying in bed, watching the moon through the window. If you're hearing this, it means the ledger wasn't enough to stop them. It means they pushed you. I want you to look in the bottom of the wooden chest. There's a smaller envelope. Inside is the title to the Ridgeview property. The Ridgeview property. It was a 50-acre plot of land on the edge of town. David had bought it years ago, saying he wanted to build a park there someday. I didn't buy that land for the company, Claire. I bought it in Leo's name. Your father and Brandon think the company is the prize. But the land, that's the future. It's zoned for residential development now. It's worth, roughly, $3 million. They don't know it exists. My lawyer, Henderson, he kept it off the public books through a private trust. It's yours. Sell it. Keep it. Build a dream on it. But whatever you do, don't let them know you have it until they're already defeated. I leaned back in my chair, a sob escaping my throat. Even in death, David was 2 steps ahead. He wasn't just my husband. He was my guardian. The next morning, I didn't wait for them to come to me. I drove to the office of the local newspaper, the County Gazette. I knew the editor, Sam Thorne. He had gone to high school with Brandon. He knew the tellers. Claire, Sam said, standing up when I walked in. I am so sorry about David. The whole town is reeling. Thank you, Sam. I'm here because I have a story for you. And I need you to print it, exactly as it is. I handed him the thumb drive, not the recording of my mother's blackmail. I wanted to keep that as my nuclear option. I handed him the documentation of the campaign finance bribes, the logs of Brandon asking for money in exchange for zoning favors. Sam looked through the files, his eyes widening with every click. Claire, this is explosive. If I run this, Brandon's career is over. He might even go to jail. Run it, I said. The people of this town deserve to know who they're voting for. They deserve to know that the man talking about integrity is the same man trying to launder money through a grieving widow's company. What about your parents? This will ruin their reputation too. I looked out the window, at the street where I had grown up. I thought about the hand-me-down shoes. I thought about the golden boy who never had to lift a finger. They made their choice, Sam. Now, I'm making mine. The story hit the stands on Thursday morning. The fallout was instant. By noon, Brandon's campaign headquarters was being swarmed by reporters. By 2 p.m., his major donors had issued a joint statement, withdrawing all support and demanding their money back. But it wasn't just Brandon. The documentation showed that my father had been assisting in the negotiations. The teller name, which had been a symbol of local prestige for 30 years, was dragged through the mud in a matter of hours. I stayed in my house. I turned off the TV. I turned off my phone. But at 5 p.m., the doorbell rang. I didn't even look through the peephole. I knew who it was. I opened the door, and there was my mother. She wasn't wearing a designer suit this time. She was wearing a trench coat, her hair disheveled, her face blotchy from crying. "You did it," she whispered. "You destroyed us." "No, Mom," I said, leaning against the doorframe. You destroyed yourselves. I just gave the town a mirror. We're being evicted, Claire. Brandon is facing a grand jury. Your father, he's had a panic attack. He's in the hospital. Is this what you wanted? To kill your own father? My father is in the hospital because he's afraid of the consequences, not because he's heartbroken, I said. My voice was like ice. Where were you when David was in the morgue? Where were you when Leo was asking why his uncle was smiling at a funeral? We were trying to secure a future, she screamed. Whose future? Yours? Brandon's? You never cared about mine. You never cared about David's. You viewed us as scaffolding for Brandon's monument. Well, the scaffolding is gone, Mom, and the monument is falling down. She lunged at me, her hand raised to slap me, but I caught her wrist. I was stronger than she realized. All those years of lifting Leo, of helping David move lumber, of carrying the weight of their expectations, I was made of steel. Don't, I said. If you touch me, I release the recording of the blackmail. I release the footage of you trying to sell me out to the zoning board. You want to keep what little dignity you have left? You walk away. Right now. She looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. She didn't see her quiet daughter anymore. She saw a woman who was done being a victim. She turned, and she walked down the driveway. She looked small. She looked old. And for the first time, I felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness. Just a profound sense of completion. Just when I thought the storm had passed, a new threat emerged. A week after the scandal broke, I received a visit at the Miller construction office. A man in a sharp gray suit, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Miller, he said, handing me a business card. Silas Vance, CEO of Vance Development. I knew the name. Silas Vance was the big fish in the state. He built malls, stadiums, luxury condos. He was the man David had always refused to work with. Silas, I said, sitting behind David's desk. What can I do for you? I heard about your family troubles, he said, settling into the chair across from me. Tragic, really. But business doesn't wait for grief. Your husband, he held some very valuable contracts for the East Side expansion, contracts that my firm needs. Those contracts are being fulfilled by Miller Construction, I said. He chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. Claire, let's be real. You're a widow with a 7-year-old. You've got a crew of guys who are loyal to a dead man. You're facing a mountain of legal paperwork. Why not make it easy? I'll buy the company, cash, $5 million. You take the money, move to Florida, and let the professionals handle the heavy lifting. The company isn't for sale, Silas. His smile flickered. Everything is for sale, Claire, especially when you consider that your brother, Brandon, owed me some significant favors that he collateralized with Miller Construction assets. My blood ran cold. He did what? Oh, he didn't tell you? Before the scandal, Brandon signed a letter of intent. He claimed to be the executor of the estate. He promised me the land rights to the Ridgeview property in exchange for my support in the election. I felt a surge of fury. Brandon had tried to sell land he didn't even own, to a shark like Silas Vance. Brandon had no legal authority to sign anything, I said, and the Ridgeview property is in a private trust for my son. It's untouchable. Silas leaned forward, his eyes turning cold. In this state, a letter of intent from a family member can be used to tie up an estate in probate for years. I can freeze your accounts, Claire. I can stop your crews from working. I can make sure you don't have enough cash to pay your electric bill, let alone your mortgage. Are you threatening me, Silas? I'm offering you a way out, he said. $5 million. Sign the papers today, or I start the filing tomorrow. You might win in 5 years, but by then, Miller Construction will be a memory. Is it worth it? He stood up, adjusted his cuffs, and walked out. I sat there, the silence of the office pressing in on me. I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. Silas Vance had more money, more lawyers, and more power than I could ever dream of. But I had something he didn't. I had David's legacy. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Henderson. Henderson, we need to go to the Ridgeview property, now, and bring a surveyor. We're not selling it. We're breaking ground. That night, the wolves made one last desperate attempt. I was tucked into bed, reading a book, when I heard it. A loud, shattering crash from downstairs. I grabbed the heavy iron flashlight I kept by the bed and crept to the landing. My heart was pounding, a frantic, rhythmic beat against my ribs. "Leo," I whispered. "I'm here, Mommy," he said, appearing at his bedroom door. He was clutching his dinosaur. "Get in the closet. Don't come out until I say so. Do you understand?" He nodded, his eyes wide with fear, and slipped into the closet. I walked down the stairs, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The living room window was shattered, glass glittering on the rug like diamonds. And standing in the middle of the room was Brandon. He was drunk. He smelled of cheap whiskey and desperation. He was holding a heavy wooden bat, one of David's old ones from the garage. "You ruined me," he slurred, swinging the bat wildly. "You took it all, Claire. My career, my money, my name." "You took your own name, Brandon," I said, keeping the flashlight beam on his face. "Get out of my house before I call the police." "The police?" he laughed, a high-pitched manic sound. "The police are already looking for me. I've got nothing left to lose. Where's the money, Claire? Where's the treasure box?" "It's gone, Brandon. It's in a safe. You'll never touch it." He lunged at me, the bat swinging toward my head. I ducked, the wood whistling past my ear, and I slammed the heavy flashlight into his ribs. He groaned, falling to his knees. "You think you're so smart," he wheezed. "You think David was a hero? He was a liar. He was keeping secrets from you, too." "He was keeping secrets to protect me from you," I screamed. "He knew you were a parasite. He knew you'd come for us. He loved me more in one day than you and Mom loved me in 30 years. I stood over him, the flashlight raised. I could have ended it then. I could have let out all the rage, all the years of being the forgotten daughter. But then, I thought of Leo. I thought of the birdhouse. I lowered the flashlight. "I'm not like you, Brandon," I said. "I don't destroy things because I'm angry. I build them. Now, get out. If you're here when the cops arrive, I won't stop them from taking you." He looked up at me, and for a second, the drunkenness cleared. He saw the woman I had become. He saw that he had no power here. He stood up, dropped the bat, and stumbled out through the broken window. I sank onto the sofa, the adrenaline leaving my body in a cold wave. I sat there in the dark, the wind whistling through the shattered glass, and I realized the wolves were finally, truly gone. 6 months later, the Ridgeview property was no longer a field of weeds. It was a construction site. But it wasn't a mall. It wasn't luxury condos for people like Silas Vance. It was the Miller Community Park and Vocational Center. I had used the Ridgeview Trust to fund a nonprofit. We were building a place where kids could come to learn trades: carpentry, plumbing, electrical work, the things David loved, the things that build a real foundation. Silas Vance tried to stop us. He filed 3 different lawsuits, but Henderson was a shark when he wanted to be. He found evidence that Silas had been colluding with Brandon on the zoning favors. Silas had to withdraw his claims to avoid his own investigation. On the day of the ribbon cutting, the whole town was there. Marcus and the crew stood at the front, wearing shirts with the Miller Construction logo. Leo was standing next to me, wearing a tiny hard hat. I stood at the podium, looking out at the faces of the people who had once whispered about me. They weren't whispering now, they were cheering. My husband used to say, "If you build it right the first time, it'll stand long after we're gone," I told the crowd. My voice was clear, echoing across the new playground. David built a company, but more than that, he built a legacy of truth. This center is for every kid who's ever been told they're just a worker bee. It's for every person who's been told they don't have a future because they don't have a title. You are the foundation of this town, and as long as I'm here, you will always have a place to build. I cut the ribbon. As the kids ran toward the new playground, I felt a hand on my shoulder. For a split second, I thought it was David. I could almost smell the peppermint and sawdust, but it was Marcus. "He'd be proud, boss," Marcus said. "I know," I said. "I think he's finally resting easy." It's been a year now. September 14th. I'm sitting on the porch of the house David and I built together. The new window in the living room is clear and strong. The garden is in full bloom. My brother is in a state-mandated rehab facility. He's facing 3 years of probation. My parents, they moved to Florida. Not to a mansion, but to a small 2-bedroom trailer. They don't call me, and I don't call them. Sometimes, I feel a pang of sadness, not for the family I have, but for the family I wished I had. The one that would have loved me for who I was, not for what I could give them. But then, Leo comes running out of the house, holding a drawing of a bridge. "Look, Mommy, I'm gonna build this bridge. It's gonna be the strongest bridge in the world." I pull him into my lap. "I bet it will be, baby." I realized that David didn't just leave me a company. He didn't just leave me land. He left me the freedom to be myself. I spent 30 years trying to fit into a box that was too small for me. I spent 30 years letting other people define my worth. But the day David died was the day I started to live. It's a strange thing, to find your strength in the middle of a tragedy, to find your voice, when the person you loved most is silenced. But that's the truth about life. It's not about the things that happen to you. It's about the things you build from the wreckage. If you're out there, and you're feeling like the worker bee, if you're feeling like you're just scaffolding for someone else's dream, please, listen to me. You are the architect of your own life. Don't let the wolves tell you you're weak. Don't let the vultures tell you you're incapable. You have the key. You've always had it. You just have to be brave enough to open the box. I'm Claire Miller. I'm a widow. I'm a mother. I'm a builder. And I'm finally home. If this story touched your soul, if it made you realize that your boundaries are your power, please leave a blue heart in the comments for Leo's birdhouse. Let's fill the comments with a sea of blue to show that we're all building something better. Don't forget to check the links in the description for resources on domestic legal protection and estate planning. Knowledge is your shield. Use it. I'll be back next part with another journey of resilience. Until then, keep building, keep growing, and never, ever let them take your light. I'm Claire Miller, and thank you for being part of my story.